Hi guys and welcome back. I'm afraid it's a bit of a dreary day, so it's a little bit darker today than usual. As you can see, my only light is not exactly best placed, otherwise I'm going to look like, the Emperor of Mankind with a halo behind me. But I thought we'd crack on anyway with the next mask, the Frozen Stars, who are kind of the psychotic, frenzied melee fighters of the Harlequins, kind of the berserkers of the Harlequins in some ways. They want to get into that glorious melee combat and do some killing. So let's start off with their trait. Now this is one of my favourite traits. It's nice and simple and capitalises on what the Harlequins are supposed to do best, really. So the Frozen Stars, Hysterical Fury. If a unit with this form charges in the charge phase, add 1 to their attack's characteristic until the end of the ensuing fight phase. Simple, right? In some ways, would be nice if it was the same as most of these traits, as in were charged or heroically intervene, but I can kind of understand why not, given that we've already got a pretty impressive stat line, and 5 attacks per infantry troop is it's pretty good. That's crazy stuff. A lot of people need characters to reach 5 attacks. So yeah, nice and simple. Dedicated to that idea of really maxing out on your melee potential. So what you're probably going to look at here are large units of maxed out 12-man troops, or what I like and what Sean Maiden has now popularized is putting them on the bikes, because the Zephyr Glaives on the bikes are so good, and because they're fast enough to be able to get into that combat quickly. The other thing that you're doing there is, if you have one big 12-man blob, you're probably Twilight Pathwaysing them so that they can move twice and then charging as well after you've moved. So that's kind of the main way of getting them into combat. The issue with that, of course, is that your survivability is going to be almost non-existent, and trying to keep a troop master up with the rest of them is difficult. But I really like the trait. I think it works fantastically on bikes, troops, pretty much anything in the Harlequin's range, because you've got a lot of attack space, and then adding that one just is the cherry on the cake, Obviously Death Jesters don't really benefit from this, but other than that, it's a very nice trait. Now, to add to that, we've got a pretty good stratagem, Malicious Frenzy. So use this stratagem before a Frozen Stars unit from your army fights in the fight phase. Until the end of the phase, add 1 to wound rolls for attacks by this unit that target enemy infantry, beasts, and biker units. So that limitation is something that we saw quite often at the beginning of the Codex releases. Now it's pretty much just +1 to wound, which, yeah, it's a shame, particularly for 2CP. However, infantry, beasts and bikers you might not see so often, but you've got a big blob of infantry there, thinking orcs, primaris, anything like that. It can be pretty nasty, so you're adding that 1 attack, so you've got a big unit of troops, with maybe potentially kisses at the moment, because they work quite well against Primaris Marines, or maybe you've got the caresses on there, and then you're just adding that 1 to wound, which can be really nice with that first charge until your troop master can kind of come up and give you the rerolls, because otherwise, it's a little bit tougher to wound, and you really want to be getting that smash first turn or second turn in there, just to really kind of double down on that melee and try and make sure that you do some damage. So this is really good, couples really well with that trait. So their warlord trait. Our kin shall rise again. Roll a d6 each time a model with a Frozen Stars unit, a model from a Frozen Stars unit from your army within 6 inches of your warlord loses its final wound. On a 6, that wound is not lost and the model is not slain. The warlord trait has no effect if the unit is under the effects of the Webway Dance psychic power. So you can't do double feels no pain, makes sense. 2 things that are kind of frustrating about this trait. 1, it's model, meaning that you want to be concertinaing your troops out as far as possible, and that's not really going to help them. And on top of that, loses its final wound. If this was just a straight up 6-up feels no pain, I think I'd be taking it a lot more. I've tried it out a couple of times. It can be quite useful. This is all pushing you towards those big units of, foot troops, essentially. And that's kind of, it feels like that's intended. We're meant to have this kind of, big units of mad rushing harlequins, not even thinking about their own protection. They're just running in there to kill as much as they possibly can. But this is a protective one, but it doesn't, honestly, there are just so many better traits. I think the main standard traits are usually better. And if you're doing this, you might want to look at something like Player of Light to re-roll failed charge rolls, just in case, or play One Foot in the Future as well to increase the movement characteristics, to keep them like up there with the Twilight Pathways troops. It's not really one that I would take. It's not one that I think is in any way necessary, and because you're going to be spending a lot of CP, you might even look at Player of Twilight on something, which is what I tend to do, just because, 2 CP for Malicious Frenzy, and then all the other CPs that you might be spending on rerolls and all sorts of other stuff, it adds up very, very quickly. So it's okay, but not my favourite. Okay, looking at their specific relic, the Ghoul Masque, Frozen Stars model only. The wearer of the Ghoul Masque can attempt to deny 1 psychic power in each enemy psychic phase in the same manner as a Psyker. If the bearer is already a Psyker, it may attempt to deny 1 more psychic power than normal. In addition, add 1 to deny the witch tests made for the bearer. Now, I think this has actually got them much better. Now that we're seeing a lot of Grey Knights, Thousand Suns, those sort of things in the meta, having that anti-Psyker is really useful. And you don't necessarily need more than 1 Shadowseer, because you desperately need Twilight Pathways, and the others are kind of optional. With the Frozen Stars, you might want to have an additional one to have those -1s to the troops, just so that you can kind of protect that big blob of 12 a little bit more. But generally speaking, you're going to only have 1 or 2 of them, and just having that added psychic protection against the new hotness, i.e. Grey Knights, which is amazing to say, thinking 6-7 months ago, and Thousand Suns can be quite useful. So it's a decent one to pick. As I think I said with the ITC secondaries as well, taking that on something that you want to use for that secondary Born for Greatness, so that you can deny a power with something that wouldn't usually be able to deny a power, isn't bad either. Thinking about taking it on a Solitaire or something, and then using that for Born for Greatness, so that you can, kill a unit, kill a character, which a Solitaire should be able to do, then also deny a psychic power and take an objective, and you can max that out very, very quickly. So I love the Frozen Stars. I particularly take them on my bike units. I'm actually looking at getting some more troops so that I can run, larger troops like I've just mentioned, and trying to really max out on that extra attack. I think they're fantastic. I actually think pure Frozen Stars armies with a mixed Vanguard detachment are pretty good. As in, you take 2 detachments or 2 battalions, or a battalion and Outrider of Frozen Stars, and then you take a mixed Vanguard detachment just to get those extra stratagems that you want to get hold of, things like, deny Overwatch, or fight again after you die, or the Dreaming Shadow stuff, which we're going to look at in another video. But I think they are a really, really fantastic sub-faction within our codex, and probably one of the strongest. For me, I think they're probably my top pick in terms of competitive play, simply because they capitalize on what we do best anyway, which is fight, in the combat phase. I know right now everyone loves their fusion pistol spam and has done since the beginning of the codex. However, we'll be looking at that in more detail later, but I just don't see a reason to take Harlequins, let's say, other than the fact that you like the faction, over an actual shooting army, if that's what you want to do, because you'll get access to rerolls and you'll get access to all sorts of other things. I find fusion pistols, for me, every single time I roll a 1, So this is one where you want to max out on that melee potential. You have no interest in things like fusion pistols. You just want to put kisses, caresses, embraces on your stuff and send it into glorious melee combat. So that's pretty much it for the Frozen Stars. As I say, I love them. I think they're fantastic. If you haven't tried them out yet, I definitely recommend testing them out in your next game after all this craziness is over. Okay, thank you very much, guys. That's all I have to say about the Frozen Stars for today. If you've had a lot of success with them, write in the comments down below. If you disagree and think, no, they just never really do what I expect them to, write it down in the comments below. Right, I'll see you all tomorrow for the next mask. Bye for now.